the feeling of being there, of walking the streets of the future, is really going to be breathtaking. You're breathtaking. You're all breathtaking. All right. So I got to finish this. So tell me, do you guys want to know when the release date?
December 10th, 2020. Amidst an awful pandemic, gamers await the release of Cyberpunk 2077. It's the latest game from Polish developer CD Project Rekt. Their last game, The Witcher 3, won multiple Game of the Year awards, so hype for Cyberpunk 2077 was wild. Beset by delay after delay after delay, it was over 7 years in the making and had all the ingredients of another CDPR masterpiece. The developer, loved by fans, promised an RPG the likes of which you've never seen, and with the surprise addition of Keanu Reeves himself in a starring role, hype for Cyberpunk 2077 entered the stratosphere. What could possibly go wrong? At release, Cyberpunk 2077 was a hot mess. From being virtually unplayable on last-gen consoles, to disappearing or non-existent pants, plus corrupted save files, and immersion-breaking moments, the RPG that games industry darling CDPR promised was not delivered. In an instant, they had lost all the goodwill that they had garnered from The Witcher 3, and no amount of Geralt's potions or Ripperdoc surgery was going to fix it anytime soon. But what led to this? Whose fault was it? How did it happen? When and where did things start to go wrong, and why, knowing full well about all its issues, did CDPR release such a shoddy product? I'm AJ Fry, and we'll try to answer these questions when we take a look at the development inferno that was Cyberpunk 2077. Warsaw, Poland, May 2012. The CD Project Rekt Summer Conference. The studio is hot on the heels of the success of Witcher 2, and they've got a big announcement to make. Take it away, CDPR co-founder Marcin Iwinski.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really honored to announce that we are working on a Cyberpunk game.
Iwinski makes a half-dozen promises about the high standards that the game will set, including this last one.
And finally, I think it's a really bold statement, but if you don't believe me, play our Witcher games. I really promise that we'll deliver a truly outstanding futuristic RPG, setting totally new standard in the genre, both in terms of the gameplay, but also on the tech side.
January 2013. CDPR dropped this animated teaser trailer, giving the world its first look at what Cyberpunk may become. According to reports, the game was in pre-production. Meanwhile, CDPR's main focus was their next big project, and that was The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt. With this, the studio struck gold. They made a game that won hundreds of awards, was considered by many to be the quintessential action RPG experience, and the genre's greatest game of all time. But where did this leave Cyberpunk? Well, CDPR had two dev teams, one for Witcher and another for Cyberpunk. Looking back on the history of The Witcher 3 in a 2016 Eurogamer article, writer Robert Perchese recalled a 2013 visit to CDPR when he got a chance to look at the team working on the game. He said they were around 50 then. This other team was working with Cyberpunk creator Mike Pondsmith in pre-production, while the rest of CDPR were going full tilt on Witcher 3. But even with an army of devs that numbered in the hundreds, Witcher 3 was delayed a couple of times. Studio CEO Marcin Iwinski told GameSpot in 2014 that staff from the Cyberpunk side were brought in to work on Witcher 3 to help finalize the game. But it wasn't until after the release of the game's Blood and Wine DLC in 2016 that production really ramped up on Cyberpunk 2077. At release, The Witcher 3 had a reported 250 in-house staff working on it. In February 2019, Cyberpunk 2077 had over 400. That might sound like a lot, and it is, but it's less than half of those who worked on large-scale AAA games like Assassin's Creed Origins. Origins lead art director Ralph Lacoste told VentureBeat in 2017 that 1,000 people worked on their game from around the world. And for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, 15 studios reportedly worked on that. Those are large numbers compared to the 400 across the CDPR studios in Poland. So by numbers alone, it seems that they were already short-handed at the daunting task of creating the AAA RPG experience of a lifetime. But hey, They made The Witcher 3, right? Surely they can pop Cyberpunk out in a few years and it will all be hunky-dory. Right? Well, that's what CDPR management apparently thought, and it seemed to be their entire mantra. Major work began on Cyberpunk in 2016 after 4 years of pre-production, but then CDPR studio head Adam Badowski took over as game director. Journalist Jason Schreier interviewed former and current CDPR staff in a January 2021 Bloomberg article. He reported that Badowski demanded major reworks of Cyberpunk's gameplay and story. As a result, 2017 saw changes to the game, including fundamental shifts in elements like gameplay perspective. Schreier's report also touched on the fact that discord between Badowski and Witcher 3 veteran devs led to some talent resigning. Schreier also revealed some details cut from his Bloomberg piece on Twitter. He tweeted, "If you're wondering just how much Cyberpunk 2077 changed over the past decade, well, up until 2016, it was a third-person game. Features that were originally envisioned, like wall running, flying cars, car ambushes, were cut along the way, which isn't atypical in game development." The journalist also tweeted, "And if you're wondering why the police system in Cyberpunk 2077 is so janky, well, it was all done at the last minute. As is evident by the final product, it was unclear to some of the team why they were trying to make both an RPG and a GTA with a fraction of Rockstar's staff." Another thing CDPR CEO Mark Chiniwinski touted was that overtime, or crunch as it's known in the industry, wasn't mandatory on Cyberpunk 2077. But according to Schreier, some staff still felt pressured to work overtime, which was paid. An ex-CDPR audio programmer told Schreier, "There were times when I would crunch up to 13 hours a day. A little bit over that was my record probably, and I would do 5 days a week working like that. I have some friends who lost their families because of these sort of shenanigans." In summer 2018, CDPR dropped its first visuals from the game at E3. The video looked like the studio was on course to not only deliver something on par with Witcher 3, but beyond it. Except devs told Bloomberg that the video was mostly fake. Much of the game's code and gameplay systems were still being worked on. Some devs told Bloomberg that they should have been making the game, but instead wasted months on the trailer. In 2019, CDPR announced that Cyberpunk 2077 would release in April 2020. Internally, according to Bloomberg, devs expected it would be delayed at least until 2022. But according to the Bloomberg piece, management wanted it out before Microsoft or Sony announced their next generation of consoles so that they could profit from both last-gen and next-gen versions. Buyers of last-gen versions would get a free upgrade, but according to Bloomberg, CDPR engineers quickly realized that last-gen consoles struggled to handle the Night City that management wanted to create. Management was told about this, Bloomberg reported, but dismissed it because of their success with Witcher 3. But there was another problem with Cyberpunk 2077's development. The global pandemic hit, and staff began working from home in March 2020. This limited their ability to work on the game, and so the game was delayed once again, much to the ire of fans, to November, and then once again until December 10th, 2020. On top of this, CDPR was pulling off some questionable marketing. According to Wired, journalists had to sign an NDA that forbade them from sharing original video of the game prior to its release. If they did share anything, they could be fined up to $27,000. Wired reports that reviewers were only sent review copies of the PC version of the game. And as we already know, base PS4 and Xbox One versions of Cyberpunk 2077 were almost unplayable at launch. The PS4 version was so bad that Sony pulled it from the PlayStation Store and offered refunds to buyers. In the time that followed its release, CDPR apologized, but that didn't stop the slew of criticism, cyberbug memes, and multiple lawsuits. As it stands, we never got the RPG beyond RPGs or a game better than The Witcher 3. What we got instead was a buggy open-world looter-shooter co-starring Keanu Reeves.
Zapper dumples and filth. In some ways, Night City never changes.
And that's it. Did you manage to enjoy Cyberpunk? Do you think we'll ever see the game that was promised? Let us know with a comment below. We hope you liked our video, and if you did, smash the like button and be sure to subscribe to the Leaderboard for more videos like this one.